Okay, let me ask a few other questions. This one. Tips for doing marriage well. Let's see your tip.
I'm still trying to do marriage well. So taking the trash out.
That's the best tip you got?
Yeah, I'm trying to
You're struggling. We're moving on. Welcome back to a new and fresh episode of Fearless. I hope everybody had a wonderful summer. And thanks for those who might have re-listened or shared those episodes that we reshared over the summer. But I am back here with a very special guest. I say that a lot about my guests when I bring them on, but this one might be my most special one because I talked my husband, Corey, into coming back into the studio. Actually, I say back. He's never even been in the office and recorded. The last time I had him on Fearless is when Fearless just started. I think it was like maybe my 5th episode. And I had a little recorder that went into my phone and we recorded it around our kitchen table. So this is quite different because when he showed up today, he goes, wow, you got cameras this time and we got real microphones. So I have Corey with me. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
He's so excited about this, can't you tell? But I wanted him here because college football just...
Sorry, sweetie. How's the coffee this morning?
I wanted him here because college football just kicked off. And for many people, this is our favorite time of year. Mm-hmm. We're excited. The air's beginning to change. It's beginning to cool off a little bit. Leaves will be able to start changing. For us in Florida, none of that happens. But it is college football. And for those that don't know, if you're new to Fearless, maybe you haven't followed me that long on social media, once upon a time, you did play football. Mm-hmm. It's been a while. College football, and then you went on to play in the NFL.
That's right.
So we're going to talk life, football, college football, NFL, family, and sports now that we're kind of navigating that with our kids and what that looks like. Because I have people all the time asking me questions, especially about you. You're kind of like a mystery man. People want to know more about you. It's funny because when I started dating Corey, I didn't really know he was kind of a big deal at the time. I didn't know much about. He was playing football at Appalachian State. That's where I grew up. I was at Liberty at the time and didn't follow App State football. And we kind of started, we had met. We didn't fall in love right away. Was not love at first sight. We've kind of shared that story before here on Fearless. Was it love at first sight for you?
It was, but not for you.
I'm not sure if that's true. But it was not love at first sight. I was a little on the shallow side. I didn't like what he was wearing. I thought he was very quiet. He wasn't very outgoing, and I guess he just didn't flirt with me enough. But anyways, time went on. We started dating, and I remember going to your first football game, and I drove with a friend. It was like hours away. It was Eastern Kentucky.
That's right.
And it was your first game back. You had had an injury the year before. Mm-hmm. And I remember showing up in Boone and you were on the football poster and it was all around town. And I went to your game and I can't remember. You'll remember everything about it. Mm-hmm. You had a interception.
2.
Oh, sorry. 2 interceptions. Mm-hmm. And a touchdown, right?
No, I saved the touchdown before halftime. I ran someone down at the 1-yard line.
Yeah, and Coach Jerry Moore, those might not know him, but he's a famous college football coach. He was Corey's coach. Anyways, he tells that story being the pivotal moment that changed that team. But anyways, I didn't know it was a pivotal moment at the time. I was just a young girl.
You were just in love.
I was so in love. I remember you being on the football field and I walked up and, I don't want to make eye contact with you. That's kind of nerve-wracking. I didn't want to embarrass you. And you're down on the football field, big star, waving to me. I thought like, wow. But I remember leaving this game thinking, I think he might be a big deal. I just said that into my heart because I knew nothing about football. So fast forward, App State. Most people know Appalachian State for one play. Mm-hmm. And that weekend, or this past weekend, being the opening college football weekend, that one plays all over ESPN because it is historically one of the top college football plays. Take us back to that moment for those that don't know. What was it like for you playing Michigan that day? Mm-hmm.
So a couple of months previous to that, we were supposed to play LSU, and Coach Moore said, "Sorry guys, the game got canceled, but we're trying to find a new game." And so a month goes by, we're like, I wonder who we're playing. And then Coach Moore said, hey, we're going to play Michigan. So everyone was very excited. It's a huge stadium. And because we had previously played LSU or LSU. And so Coach Moore got us all excited, and we knew we'd play in one of the biggest stadiums in the country. So going, fast forwarding to September 1st, it was 2007. That's the first game of the year. So that's the game that all the big guys, they beat up on the little guys, right? It's the David and Goliath.
And actually that year is when Adam Sandler's movie came out,
Yes,
right? The Longest Yard.
The Longest Yard.
And they mocked App State.
That's right. So it was apropos, that movie just coming out and saying, yeah, we usually play a small team so we can beat them up, just like Appalachian State. And so yeah, we went into Michigan and we played a very hard game. It was very hot that day. And so the last play is the iconic play that they play for every September 1st, or the first weekend of September for college football. I guess just to remind the big guys that they could still lose to a little guy. So yeah, it was 34-32, and there were 6 seconds left in the game, and they had to kick a field goal to win it. And so we blocked the field goal, and we made history that day.
Now, when y'all went in there, what people don't realize is some people think, oh, it was just luck. It was just a good game that day. Appalachian State was in the middle of a football dynasty and building a football dynasty.
That's right.
You had already won 2 national championships.
That's right.
Did y'all walk in that day thinking you were going to win?
Maybe some people did, but I didn't. I mean, you got 109,000 people cheering against you. I think we had 45 fans, maybe. You were one of them. And so you just that's the power. That's the the pinnacle of college football, and just blessed to be there. I never would have thought we would have won. I thought we were going to play well. We were on a 20-game win streak. We had just won 2 national championships, and we had a lot of good talent on the team. So, but as far as winning the game, I think it, generally speaking, was an impossibility. It was mission impossible.
I've never asked you this question. What was said to y'all, or do you remember at halftime in the locker room?
I remember a lot of the younger guys on the team being so excited because we were winning by 2 touchdowns. And, me and a couple of the older guys, and especially Coach Moore, was like, hey, please stop being excited because you're going to get the wrath of Michigan football in the second half. And we did. But we had just a little bit of a lead. But they got plenty of players and backups. We don't have any backups. Whoever starts, you better not get hurt because the backup is going to get tossed around like a rag doll. So we had just enough starters to compete with them.
Take us to the moment right before you blocked the kick. At that moment, because people don't realize, once again, just it wasn't one kick that you blocked. You were very well known for this. You did it through your college career, and even in the NFL. We're good with very good friends with 2 punters in the NFL. If they happen to listen, and you happen to block one of theirs when they wasn't your teammate. However, you're very good at it. You went on to the NFL. Teams would say they would study you on special teams. So take us back to that moment. Did you think, I have this now?
No, I think you, so the previous year I had blocked the same exact kick. You can look it up on video. It's the same exact kick. It's actually from the other side though, the left side, not the right side. And the ball bounced up to me and I scored a touchdown. So against Michigan, the ball bounced up to me but I didn't score.
Yes, my brothers remind you that all the time, that you got ran down by the kicker.
I did. He was a fast kicker. But one day, hopefully, we can just do some AI to the film and I can score and spike the ball or something.
People didn't realize your legs were so tired. Once again, they didn't have subs.
Yeah, we didn't have subs. That was the most tired I had ever been in all of my football career, was that play. But what was the question before?
I think at that moment when you're on that line, did you think, I have this? Because you've practiced it over and over. And I look at life and I tell people, you'd practiced it over and over. And when we've done that, like when we read scripture over and over, when something comes up, we can have confidence in that moment because we know the playbook.
Yeah. So that moment wasn't an accident. A lot of people think it was, just because block kicks are, sometimes they're generally considered accidents. but it wasn't an accident. We had practiced that play hundreds of times, and that was thanks to Coach Moore during the summertime. We would practice field goal blocking at 100%, and no college team does that. It's pretty dangerous for the kickers; they could get hurt. But Coach Moore just had a premonition that if we practice this at 100%, something in our future is going to change, and it was meant for that day. I blocked a couple more kicks throughout that year, but I was just very good at it. I had been good since high school. Blocking kicks, I was able to get off the ball. I was able to move at the right time, slap people's hands down, whatever you only get like 1.2 seconds to block the kick. So during those 1.2 seconds, I was very good.
I think of just those habits, and I'm going to mess up this quote, but Tammy Jo Schultz always says, like, our habits on a good day become our instincts on like a bad day. Not that you were having a bad day, but in that moment, those had been your habits. Those are what you had practiced in life. And
I remember hearing a sermon actually from a pastor that was preaching to us before a game, and he just said how legends are made and how the greats are made. You see like people catching a touchdown pass in a Super Bowl. He's like, they'd been catching that same football since they were a child, but they had made it a point to do it over and over and over and create habits. And it was a great catch, but no better than any other catch that they had ever been. But if you're not prepared when the moment comes, when it's your time to shine, when it's your moment, just like I think about David and Goliath when he picked up those stones. I don't think that was the first time he ever slung a stone before. It was his moment, and he had slung millions and millions of stones as a child, and that was his confidence.
Every time I see that play, which we just saw it this past weekend over and over, and it's neat now that you have a son that's beginning to care about football and love it and see those plays for dad. I'm just always reminded, I get very emotional still because it's God's goodness throughout your career. And when I remember being interviewed maybe a few years ago, it's kind of going to show our age of how old this play is now, but somebody was doing an interview and they were interviewing all these former players on your team. And he said, wow, every person I've interviewed has all said something very similar or common. There was something different about this team, that God was in the center of it. And a lot of people are like, do you pray for wins? Do you pray for your kids' teams to win? And during that time period, if it ever becomes a movie or a mini series of App State football, because it was pretty incredible. There were a lot of games y'all weren't supposed to win. But God was just so evident on that team and in players' lives. Take us back to what God was in that team, y'all's Bible study, how important it was.
We had a spirituality-wise, we had first of all, a great leader. Coach Moore, he's a Christian. He's unashamed of being a Christian. He always encouraged people to go to Bible study on Wednesday nights. We would hold a players' Bible study. He would always encourage pastors to come in and speak to us, or different evangelists or speakers to come in and speak to us. So he was always pursuing spirituality with the team. But as far as the players go, there was, on a Friday night, you're getting ready for your Saturday afternoon game. So we would always make sure everyone was together on a Friday night. We would talk about the game. We would always watch a movie, just kind of hang out, not get in trouble. And but after that, it was time to go home, say 10 p.m. or 9 p.m., time to go home and sleep and rest for the game. But we would, it started out with like 10 players. We would go on the field and pray for the game the next day. And so, it ended up, my senior year is probably 60 guys out there on the field, in the pitch black dark, praying for the game. And so years later, we found out that Coach Moore he would sneak up to the top of the bleachers and he would watch us do that. So that was pretty cool, finding that out years later. But I don't know if you pray for wins or not.
I do. Or says you have not because you asked not. So I prayed for him. But those didn't work when you got to the NFL. You didn't win as much.
No, we didn't win quite as much. But surely some of those games, You just sit back and think about them. I think about that same Michigan year. We're going to the national championship. James Madison, they're on the 3-yard line, and all they have to do is score a touchdown. There's 10 seconds left in the game, or kick a field goal. They win, and they go to the national championship, and they fumbled. Like those my last 3 years were storybooks.
They're very special.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because God will use victory for his glory. And he did during those times. Coach Morey would give God the glory.
That's right.
You and so many others, that when we're praying for our children now, or for your children to win, he'll also use those losses too. But in that time,
Mm-hmm.
he was definitely using those victories for his glory.
Mm-hmm.
But on a different note, one topic that I wanted to bring up on today's podcast that has been in the news the past 2 years is college football NIL. And for those that don't know, that's the ability to profit off their name, image, and likeness. And what that boils down to is college athletes can now get endorsements, they can get paid, they can get contracts, while also receiving their school scholarship and their sports scholarship. So what are your thoughts on the NCAA and the schools allowing these NIL?
Well, first of all, I wish it was around when I was around, because I probably would have made a few more dollars
I do too.
from
You
Michigan.
could have taken me on more dates. By the way, he teased me on our first date that I needed to pay. I think he was also driving my mom's car
Yeah.
to take me on my first date.
The NIL, I think I understand it from a few perspectives, but I think in the end, it's going to be a debacle in the end. I see people, and this comes from experience. So when I went into the NFL, you see rookies get in and they get big contracts, and you can see their life unravel sometimes. Some guys can handle the money, some guys can't. But could you imagine an 18-year-old kid driving a Ferrari around the campus? I mean, it's and it's happening. So I think it's not healthy for a team environment. Like I said, I understand the premise that someone is profiting off of these kids playing football, mainly football, and so they want the kids to profit. But I see, the Bible talks about the love of money is the root of all evil. And so when you get to the NFL and you see that love, you see many signs of evil. And so, there's a lot to unravel in the NIL, but when you're getting paid for a performance-based sport, and say you're 19 years old and you're not doing as well as you did as a freshman, I think the negatives far outweigh the positives. Maybe your sponsor says, I need that Ferrari back. And then your teammate says, well, what happened to your Ferrari? Well, I dropped the touchdown pass last week and they took away my car. The snowball effect can be great all the way down into their personal lives. So, you're still developing at 18, 19 years old. I don't think anybody should be driving around a Ferrari at 18 or 19 years old.
I think it's a reflection of what we value in our culture and our society, because and the reality is they are getting paid. They're getting paid in housing and food and scholarship. They're getting an education that will further them later in life. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, that's not valued as a payment. Their value comes in cars or money and other contracts.
Yeah, and if you want to pay someone contracts, like let's look at a futures contract. Let's look at what happens when you turn 30 or 35. You put money away for the future. I can understand that stuff, but just to give young, immature, testosterone-filled young men lots of money it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, it's like the NCAA had such strict rules, and then they just went to the far opposite direction, to where at one time Corey got charged after he had surgery.
Yeah.
Somebody went down and picked up his mother at the airport, and he got charged.
I got fined for someone picking my mom up at the airport
while you were in the
hospital. In the hospital undergoing surgery from a broken bone, playing football for the college. It's like, so you go from
now they've gone to one extreme to the other. Let's talk NFL, because you were blessed for many seasons, way beyond the average. There were some good days. There were some hard challenges in the NFL. And it definitely didn't end on the terms we would have liked to. When things don't end on your own terms, it can be a painful transition at times. But you were drafted to Cincinnati, 3 years in Tampa, a year in San Diego, and then our last year we were with the Titans and Colts. But of all those teams, that was a lot. Whew, what was your favorite team to play for in the NFL?
I really enjoyed my last year playing for the Colts. They had such a family atmosphere there. Whatever their whatever their concoction was inside of their their front office, they just, whatever it was, they had it. It's like the difference between going to Taco Bell versus going to Chick-fil-A. It's a different feeling, right? So there's that front office. They had a family like atmosphere, and it's still cutthroat. If you don't perform, you get fired. But really enjoyed the Colts. They great guys on the team. They had quality leadership all the way up the ladder. So really, really like them.
It was even that for us wives. A lot of times the NFL is not glamorous for the family. If the you got the top like 2% of big players that are paid a lot of money, but a lot of us get bounced around. Husbands, it's like week to week. A lot of people don't know this little fact, were fired on an HBO reality show.
That's right, Hard Knocks.
From the Bengals, Hard Knocks. You were fired right there on television. It seems like another lifetime ago. But so when your last year, we had just had a baby, you got picked up and left you got cut right before she was born, and then right after she was born, you got picked up and left, and I got in a car and drove all those miles by myself. Mm-hmm. You got cut again. We had to move out. I was in and out of 8 different homes and hotels those first 2 months of her life.
Yeah.
But when we got to the Colts, there was just a sweet, sweet spirit of just godly, just women, and even those that didn't know Christ. Our Bible study was sweet. Yeah. A lot of girls came to know Christ. Mm-hmm. It was a sweet time.
Yeah, they had quality coaches, and just throughout the whole organization.
Some people may, and some people might not realize, like, the NFL is a really dark world. Mm-hmm. I mean, that locker room is a tough place, and you kind of alluded to that when you're talking about just the love of money. But talk about some of the things that you might have heard that would have been like shocking for people, just to kind of set the atmosphere for them. But how and there are some just godly men in the NFL. The NFL, of course, has been very divisive in the last few years, kneeling of the flag and just a lot of the controversy going on. But there's a lot of good players out there, godly coaches and godly players. Mm-hmm. But how would you all in that dark world set kind of the scene of what maybe a day would be like for you? Tampa might have been the darkest days. Yeah. But how y'all stayed true to your faith and...
I mean, I don't think I can share with you the darkness of the locker room on this show. I don't think your listeners would want to hear that.
That's why I'm always baffled, in the last couple of years, and just the world's so stunned of how one man would talk and it got caught on camera, which is awful and it's unexcusable. The sad thing is that's the majority of the world. Mm-hmm. And because that's the lack of Christ in somebody's life.
That's right, yeah.
I look at that. That was your everyday life in the NFL. You were mocked one day for not even looking at the pornography that they were showing to start a meeting.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you didn't say an F word in every sentence, then you were kind of like a weirdo. That's just how you speak. And when you're in, when you're in that society. As far you want to go into debauchery is whatever your mind can think of. That's what the NFL has to offer. But I don't think it's so much different than the world. I don't think that it's different because there's a lot more money. But as far as the world and how the world acts, it's not a lot different. But you can find what you want to find. You can find what you want to find in a Christian college. If you want to go party or do bad things in a Christian college, you can find that and do that. I've always said this. I think that in those atmospheres, when people realize who you are, what you stand for, if you are true to yourself and you are walking a straight road, they might not like you. They probably won't like you, but they will respect you. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt the respect at the end of the day. I felt plenty of not liking me for what I stood for. I felt plenty of that. But there was always respect. You could sense it always. So now if you're wavering in those situations and people know that you're wavering, now that's a whole different world you're going to live in, because now people they're gonna make fun of you, or they're going to say that you're a hypocrite and all that stuff.
Yeah, so. I think it's important when we as Christians, and we claim to be Christians, It has to be an unwavering walk. And that's getting harder and harder in the current culture we're in because the world is watching us.
That's right. They do watch.
And I grew up like that as a Graham with the last name Graham. People were always watching me. One story, I don't know if I've ever shared it here one time. It was right after the Michigan game. We're going to go back to college. And fans were going nuts. So your first home game after Michigan, I mean, fans, App State fans, they're not the best in the world, but a lot of college students aren't the best fans. I mean, they were tearing down the fences to get into the stadium. And they were sitting, we were pass holders, and there were some drunk college students sitting in our seat. And we've politely would ask them to move. They would not move. They said they're blankety-blank students. They're allowed to sit wherever they want. I mean, it went on. Okay. So I went and got a security guard and asked the security guard, these are our seats that we've paid for. Can you ask the students to move? And the security guard goes, well, that's not my job. I don't have the authority to do that. And so later went back, and the girl was so drunk that she fell on top of me. And while she was falling down, pulled my shirt down for all to see. And my natural reaction is I swung at her. And because nobody would move the drunk girl, and that girl's pulling my shirt down. So I remember they finally security got her out of there, and they tried to take me out of there. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. Y'all should have done your job and had control of this situation where the girl's pulling my clothes off. And I had a lady come up to me and whisper in my ear from my back and says, I know exactly who you are, and you're a horrible example to my little girl. To be honest, I had to sit on my hands so I didn't whack her one. But the point of that is the world's always watching.
They are, yeah.
And it's a good reminder, even in those moments where that person was right or wrong, to judge me and didn't know the whole story. It's a good reminder the world's watching. And I remember when you were fired from the Bengals, and we had claimed, just the Christians in that, they said the world's going to watch you and how you react. They're watching your language. They're watching your temperament, your anger. And there were some hard days after that. We had to be very graceful, not to share the whole story, but it comes down to our language. There was a time on the field, because you never curse, they thought you had said a bad word.
I got hurt pretty bad, and I said, oh, shoot. And I got a thigh bruise, and it hurt extremely bad. And it was like, here are all these guys that say the F word every 3 seconds. And it was like the whole world stopped spinning. And the head coach even came up to me while I'm laying on the ground in agony. And he didn't check on me to see what was like wrong with my leg. He just wanted to know if I cursed or not. And but
in that moment, if you had, I think it would have changed everything. That respect all of a sudden would have been gone, because you would have been just like them.
Yeah. Like you were saying, everyone, the world watches.
Yeah. And we have to be living our life separate, whether it's our language and our actions and how we live our life. Because we talk about that one thing, this is on a lighter note. And I don't know why I'm going to bring this up, but I'm going to. Corey is quite the inventor. He likes to invent things. He was a physics major in college. He's very smart. Mathematics minor. Not the typical football athlete. Physics department was very proud that they had a football star in their department. So he's always problem solving. Even to this day, some of our biggest fights can be if we're walking and he's looking at something of how it's made, and we're late to something and he's trying to explain it to me, which goes in one ear and out the other. But he's a problem solver. So right after we got married, he lost his wedding ring twice on the football field at the Bengals. And but he wanted to wear his ring because a lot of men don't wear their rings for many different reasons. Of course, they don't want to get it jammed on their finger, but they might have mistresses on the side and girlfriends on the side and not commit to their significant other. So you started wearing years ago, because when did you start in the NFL?
Oh, wait.
That's a long time ago. Way before Quelo rings were out, you started wearing a rubber plumber's O-ring.
Yes. And
everywhere you went, that created...
People go, what is that on your hand? I said, oh, that's my fake wedding ring. I'm wearing a 20-cent O-ring. So
everybody, even like Rondé Barber, you bought him one, and he started wearing it. It created conversations everywhere we went. So I just want to know, telling people, what do you think now when you see people wearing these Quelo rings and other rings, which, by the way, former teammates of yours started these companies, or family members of old teammates started these companies. What do you think? Man, I invented that. I could have, man,
No,
I could have
been
set
something.
Sissy up for life.
I could have
if I
been
had
something if
stickler.
I would have come up with rubber wedding rings.
I would be set for life if we had those monies now. But I get now that we are switching gears here, let's talk about family, because you and I, different stage of life. We have a son who's just now starting to football. And to be honest, you and I are terrible sports parents. For somebody that's been in the NFL, you don't watch sports. We don't watch ESPN. We're not always involved. We're selfish with our weekend times. So the thought of spending all day at the football field or something is like, ugh, I'm not sure if I like it. But like it or not, our son's there. He came up to me last year, very upset, and goes, Mom, my neighbors know a lot about football. My cousins know a lot about football, and I know nothing. And my dad played football. So you and I were trying to do better with that. But a lot of conversations with the concussions now is just more part of the conversation than it was when you grew up because of the science and the effects that have come out over the years. What do you think about, I get a lot of questions on my social media asking, are you going to allow Austin to play football?
My stance has always been no, I will not allow my children to play football.
Why?
Because of the damage that I've seen happen to my body. But I've changed that stance because I think I would have regretted if my father would have said that to me, I would have regretted his decision. I would have held that against him. Ultimately, once you become, you go to high school, and when you're 18, you go to college, you're becoming an adult. You have the ability to make those decisions. So I think if he wants to play, then I will let him play. But would I rather him play or not? I would rather him not play. Not because it's not a great game, because it is. I think it's the greatest game man has ever put on the face of the earth. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you toughness. It teaches you grittiness. It teaches you how to be an athlete. It teaches you how to work out. I mean, it teaches you strength and power and discipline, and you can go on and on. It teaches you how to become a man in society, and but the repercussions are pretty great as the weights and the speeds are going up and up every year. The athletes are getting bigger and stronger and faster every single year, and you're gonna. I predict. I've been predicting this for many years that someone dies on the NFL football field in the next 10 years. Because it is such a violent game.
Well, players are getting stronger and faster and hitting harder than
and
they
it
used
almost happened this last year with DeMar Hamlin. It was minutes from happening. I've been predicting that for years. So will I let my son play football? Yeah, it's a hard question. But I think by the time he becomes an adult, it's his decision. But yeah, it's a very tough one, and I understand. And I'm speaking from experience. I played 25 years solid football.
And you tell me all the time your body hurts.
My body hurts.
Recently, I saw a video of former baseball player and Hall of Famer Chipper Jones. And in an interview, they were asking about his family and raising his children. And he was basically saying, the sports today are way more demanding than when he was growing up. And then when you were growing up as well, that now it is 12 months out of the year, 7 days a week. And he just was saying, my family time is going to be my family time. We're going to take summer vacations, and we're going to go on vacation and spend time as a family. And I'm not going to let the sports control that. What do you think our family should do, or those listening? It's just different times. You can say that, but it is going to affect your child and their
That's
performance.
Right. Yeah, there's been a paradigm shift, especially in the game of football, since about 2010 and maybe 2008, 2007, where it became a 12-month sport. Even in college is way different. Some summers I would just be at home for maybe 7 weeks, 8 weeks, relaxing and training. Now you can't do that. In pretty much every college system, you can only have 1 week off for your summer, and then you have to come back to school. So I don't believe in football as a 12-month sport. I think it is a 5-month sport. And then you sprinkle it in through the other months, because it's so demanding. Your body can only handle so much, and so it's
But
tough
that's with
right
all
now.
sports now, like in
Yes,
baseball and Little League.
yeah,
It's all
baseball's
through the
always been the
summer.
worst.
It's through the summers,
Yeah.
and our son loves baseball, and I'm having a hard time with that
Yeah, I
one
grew
because
up.
the schedule is so demanding. Maybe we can go into pickleball. But I think that's a really hard decision for parents.
It is.
And I would just encourage, don't sacrifice that family time.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned just from other parents that have gone before me, because you and I are just at the beginning of all this stage, and I had a coworker ask, like, how do we have one kid that's really into sports, one kid that's not. And how do we balance that excitement and not overshadow, our excitement for the achievements of one in sports, not overshadow the child that's not into sports, but also make them feel excited and cherished and valued. Because I value our family time. And I don't want them to sacrifice their sports, because I know it will hurt them. If you don't show up on practice on Sunday, it's going to hurt them. But I also want to know we're as a family. We do things as a family. We're going to go on vacations with families, your siblings. If one has a baseball game, we're going to go to that baseball game together. If one has a band concert, we're going to go to that band concert together and value each other in that time. But it's getting harder and harder to do that.
It is, but I mean, I think the excitement. I think the divisiveness would come from the excitement of two kids. Maybe one's an athlete and one's not too good of an athlete, and so that. But as far as I just remember, a couple months ago, one of our friends, her son won the spelling bee, and she was so excited for her son, like it was like he had won the Super Bowl. And so whatever your son does, whatever your daughter does, just get excited over it. If sports is not the end all be all, it's just one part of our society. There's music and there's the arts and there's dancing. And so in these youthful pursuits, so if you're a dad that had 3 girls, cheer for the ballet recital, sorry you didn't have a boy and, he doesn't play football, but your girls want your excitement too.
Yeah. I think one thing that's interesting, as we've talked, sports can be just a completely different world on that field. And our kids can be exposed to a lot with families that might not have shared beliefs and shared lifestyles. How do we protect our kids? And for some reason, as Christian parents, we seem to kind of throw in the towel when it comes to sports and kind of excuse it, like the foul language that coaches use. For some reason, we think it's okay. Like even there's a Christian school where we live that was allowing the baseball coach to use very foul language, like GD and the F word. And I didn't understand that. I'm like, why are we giving an excuse because they're a coach? If a teacher had said that, they would have been out of there at the Christian school. But for some reason, and then I just hear that more and more. Like you went to a Little League and you can explain that, just practice to show Austin, and the language was horrific. So how do we protect our children where they can still play the sports, but to live their life differently and not, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think mostly you protect them at home. They see who you are at home. You can't just put on a facade when you get to the football field. But our children are going to see things we don't want them to see in society. And how do we mitigate that? Do we not let them play sports because Joe's, dad curses? It's a tough mitigation plan. How do you figure out how to protect them, but also allow them to be part of our society? I don't know that. I haven't walked through those waters yet. But like you said, when I was at that youth football game, I brought Austin over because he really hasn't been around football too much. And I just couldn't believe that the coaches were just F-bombing these 9-year-olds and telling them, they weren't going to let them play unless they smash the other kids. And like, man, these kids are 9 years old. Like, do you want to give them swords and spears? And it's like it was a barbaric atmosphere that I didn't appreciate. So we talked about this the other day, and I think it falls upon the coaches to realize that there should still be chivalry in sports. Sports is meant for it to shape a young man or a young woman. It's meant to give them discipline and drive and desire and all these things that shape you into a disciplined young adult. So the respect for your opponent, I see that dwindling fast in our society. So yeah, that's a really, I don't know the answer to that. How do you mitigate your child going into youth sports?
Just being actively engaged in our children and having those conversations. Like you said, those days have yet to come, and we're going to learn as we go. And I might have more podcasts in the years to come about sharing what I've learned, but having conversations with our kids, recognizing how the world might speak or what they accept, but in this household, this is why we don't, and this is what Scripture says about the power of the tongue, and just being so active. And it's like you said, our kids have to see that at home and be able to model that. One of the things, I mentioned this in an episode back in the spring, talking about Sundays and the Sabbath, but when it comes to sports, more and more sports are playing on Sundays now. And just last week, I was looking up a flag football league for Austin, and they only practice and played on Sundays. So it's obviously not a league we can be a part of. What would you say to parents during that, trying to make that decision? Because once again, culture is shaping just quite differently, making it difficult for us to raise our kids in that.
I mean, if you want to look at a historical cultural background, you look at the Israelites, and God said, hey, I don't want you to do anything on Sundays or on the Sabbath, right? And so, but the rest of the world, they worked on Sundays, and they were actually punished for not following that directive from God, right? And so the Sabbath is a holy day. You can argue about how holy should you not even walk outside your house on a Sabbath. You can argue all those, but I do think that hey, and I'm guilty of it too, right? And your listeners that are astute enough, I played in the NFL, right? So my job was required of me on Sundays. Now, we always had a church service on Saturday night. So I do think that that 1-2 hour time frame, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, of you and your family and your children, just like you talk about around the dinner table, that time frame that you can get together, the time frame that you can be in church, whether maybe it is Saturday night because you're really involved in a Sunday sport, but more than just Sunday, setting apart time to focus on God is very important, and I think in the end your children will respect you for that. They probably will be mad at you, during the time, like, Johnny's playing on Sunday and I can't, or Johnny's doing this and I can't. When they get around to being adults, I think will respect you for that decision.
We're going to shift gears a little bit here, maybe ask you a few questions that some listeners or some people submitted on Facebook. But one question I get all the time on social media is, what does Corey do now? Or what's our lifestyle? You and I live a very unique lifestyle. We live in Florida. That's where you were born and raised. And when we moved to Tampa for the Bucks, we ended up just making Florida home. But you work for Samaritan's Purse part-time in the summer. You can explain what you do. But we just live a very different lifestyle. So let's give a life update of our crazy life.
So I've been working the past couple of years for Samaritan's Purse. I've been building churches in very remote places in Alaska. Your father has an initiative to build a church build one church every summer in many villages in Alaska. They're very dark, depressed. They're almost like third world countries.
Yeah, there's high suicide rate.
Yeah,
drugs, sexual abuse. Rate. Most girls and boys sexually abused by a family member by a young age. I
actually just met a gentleman that was 65 and just broke down in front of us because he was sexually abused when he was 6 years old. And so you see that it's very thick in the atmosphere there. And the only hope is the gospel. And so it's the only medicine. It's the only vaccine to that culture.
And so what are y'all doing?
And so we're building a church, an evangelical church with different organizations in Alaska. And so most of these churches are falling down. It's the extreme temperatures. The ground is always freezing and thawing and moving up and down. And it's very difficult to figure out how to build up there. So the team up there has really figured out the right materials to use. And so this year, in 15 weeks, we'll build a 2,400 square foot church in 15 weeks. It's pretty remarkable.
It is remarkable, and it's also very, very difficult to, most of Alaska you can only get to by plane, or a barge can bring in. So all your supplies, for those who are listening, all came in on a barge. They got on that barge in Seattle in April.
Mm-hmm.
It was a cold, cold spring and summer, so it was late even getting to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the barge couldn't even get into town, had to land.
Yeah, about a mile out of town, but the road had been washed away from a previous storm, so then we had to build a road to get to the barge, and then we had to figure out how to get all
Discovery Channel.
Yeah,
shows.
It's like Ice Road Truckers. I mean, it's like, sheesh. It's you have problems and you have solutions, and that's all you do all day is figure out solutions to problems.
So Corey does that in about 5 months, more than that, because it takes a lot of prep work throughout the summer, and built with volunteers, Samaritan's Purse volunteers. But then we live in Florida. People want to know what you do in Florida.
I like to invest in real estate, so we have a couple rental homes, Airbnbs.
Because I think my family still wants to know, what do you do?
Yeah. Well,
we're the millennials that have learned jobs on YouTube and Corey's YouTube certified.
I'm YouTube certified, YouTube certified electrician, YouTube certified plumber, go on and on.
Okay, let me ask a few other questions. This one. Tips for doing marriage well. Let's see your tip.
I'm still trying to do marriage well. So, taking the trash out.
That's the best tip you got?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
You're struggling. We're moving on. I don't know who submitted that question. Corey and I.
We're still trying to do marriage well.
Just so you know, we do not do marriage conferences. We don't speak marriage things.
People ask us, "Hey, you need to tell us how to be better married because you guys are the perfect married couple." And
they say that? Oh,
we're like,
okay.
We're not.
We're moving on. That one's making me nervous. How much is football driven by money and fame versus the love of the game?
I mean, personally, when you get to the NFL, it's definitely, I wouldn't say that I wanted fame, but I, looked at it as a job and an opportunity to, make a good living while I was young, to invest later in life. So, but the game, that as far as the profiting game from ownership and the NFL, it's that's really the whole reason of it is money.
I think people need to realize it's a job.
Yeah,
NFL
once you get to the NFL, it's
you.
a job. That's right. And so some people make it out very well, and some people don't make it out so well.
Here's one about me again. Love talking about me. What was it for each of you that made you to decide this is the one? You're looking at me.
I remember when I was young, I really didn't want to have many girlfriends. I wanted to focus more on who I would be married to, rather than just frivolously dating around. So when I met you and saw your heart, and especially your heart for the Lord, and also your beauty, which you decline most days. Well, that's a good tip for marriage. If your husband tells you you're beautiful, just say, "Okay, thank you, sweetie."
Okay,
right?
Thank you, sweetie.
There you go. But yeah, your beauty, and I don't know. Sometimes in life you just know. You just know who it is.
Well,
you know you're the one.
let me answer for my side because it said for both of us. Like I said earlier, it was not love at first sight. I didn't even think he was very cute. And if you're watching the video, he's very good looking. So I was
Thank you, honey.
I was crazy, but I think God wanted me to fall in love with his heart first, which I truly did because at App State, like one story we didn't share, because I think we've shared it before when I had him on Fearless, was like they were doing this chant in the huddle, and it had some curse words in it.
Yeah.
And we saw that all the time in the NFL, people that would be at Bible study one moment and then doing these cursing chants in the locker room the next. It didn't make sense, but you stood up and said, we're not going to do this chant anymore because not all of us agree with it. And I just remember that being like, wow, he, like my dad, they say that's the scary thing. You're going to marry somebody like your father. I did, and he's getting more and more like my dad as we get older. But I remember like you weren't going to compromise that, and you were willing to take the stand, and you didn't care. But with that, you were able to do that because of the respect you had gained, and with the position you had on the team being so good, people respected you for that. And so I remember that because then, once I fell in love with your heart, whew, you were so good looking.
Thank you, honey.
I tell you all the time, I don't know if this is good or bad or if I should share this, but like if I'm in a store or somewhere, I'll kind of go from man to man. Are they as good looking as Corey? Nope. Are they good looking as Corey? Nope. Like I hit the jackpot.
Blush.
I know.
You did.
I really did. Yeah. Okay. We made such special bonds in the NFL. And for that, I'm so thankful. I remember it was like winter. It was like 2 degrees outside in Indianapolis, and we'd all go to each other's home. Some of us would spend the night together and hang out. But those bonds, like the NFL gives such special relationships and friendships. And they kind of come and go because you're cut and you're hired and cut and hired. But that's something I'm forever thankful for. You know, as we're getting ready to close, and we have one last question, and say there's a boy or girl in high school, loves sports, wants to go and play in college, or even farther after that, and their parents are listening, what would you tell them? How to balance that faith, how to go after that dream? Because you lived a dream. I remember dropping you off at Raymond James Stadium, only because we only had one parking pass, so I had to drop you off. And I remember praying with you every Sunday morning, thanking God that you got to live out a dream. Because the reality is most kids are not going to live out that sports dream or that other dream that they might have. You did. You got to be on the other side of it. And you've also had heartache when it came to that dream, where it was taken away like that overnight, and you never got to play the sport you loved again.
Yeah.
That's a painful reality. But what would you tell those kids?
As far as sports goes, you only have a certain amount of time allotted to you, right? Because when you hit 30, or if say you're in the NFL, you hit 30 or 28, you're like an old guy around. So the Bible talks about the flowers of the field, they sprout very soon, but they soon wither. And so I always think about like a flower that's on, say I give you a flower and it's on our countertop. That flower only has like 2 or 3 days to bask in its glory, and then the petals start falling off. And so you have this time allotted to you by God. Your heart's beating, you're breathing air in your lungs, and you have a youthful body. So the Bible says that whatever we do it all to the glory of God. And whether that's, dancing or ballet, whether that's playing the guitar, whether that's football and like hitting people really hard and tackling people well, just do that, not for your own glory, but for the glory of God. I remember a verse that stuck out to me when I was in high school, and it said, I don't know if I'll get this right, but let not the wise man boast of his wisdom, or the rich man boast of his riches, nor the strong man boast of his strength. But if you wish to boast, boast in this, that you know your Lord. And so, that really stuck with me through the years, that I would boast. As I had strength, I had speed, I had agility, I had all these things, but that wouldn't be the overarching boastfulness. The overarching boastfulness would be that I knew my Lord.
You did get to live out your dream. However, I can remember the day I got a phone call from you. I remember exactly where I was, what store I was, where I was standing when you said, Cissie, I got injured and I'm coming home. And it was in training camp, or not training camp, spring training.
Right before you.
With the Colts. And I remember that moment. A lot of times when players get hurt or injured, they're just not out of the NFL unless it's a really bad injury. They kind of like phase out. They might come back for another 3 months, and then maybe 2 months they get picked up and later in the seasons. And you kind of fade out. But right then and I knew it's over. Although you would continue to train for another 1.5 years trying to get back, and you went for some tryouts. But I knew in my heart then, and when you don't end something on your own terms, when something is just taken away, something you knew, for many players, that's their identity. Thankfully, it wasn't your identity. You had more, but still, you wore a uniform for 20 years. It's a sport you loved. And sadly, with football, when it's over, it's over. It's not like you get to go play a pickup game of pickleball or something like that. It's over. You never play again. We never saw our friends again. We never went back. How do you tell people like that when a dream's taken away? I don't want to you got to live it, but when it comes to a halt, then it's taken away. What was that like for you, and what would you tell people in that moment?
It was very difficult because for me, because I don't think football was my identity, but I was an NFL football player, and that's what I walked every day. And an injury stopped that, and so they said, "Hey, you can't be here anymore. You're not part of the team." So, you pack your bags and you leave, and you never go back. So you're walking into your job for years, and then you're not allowed to come back. It's difficult to have a sever like that. But if your identity is truly focused and engulfed in one thing like sports, or you can get into a downward spiral easily. That's just who we are as human beings. But when your identity is focused in Christ, it's still hard. It's not like it's frolicking in the flowers. It's still difficult, but you have something to hold on to. You have a life preserver. You're not just drowning in your own despondency. You have something to lean on and something to understand. And also, just on a real scale, I think we don't have enough. We don't have enough things that we are aspiring to. Just because I'm in the NFL, I wanted to build a house, or I wanted to build a boat.
Hey, right now he has started his own boat company.
But I think that don't be engulfed in your job so much that you don't have desires for other things. What's your hobby? What do you do on the weekends? Have other interests. But ultimately, when it's severed, you have to have Christ to lean on. Otherwise, you're going to be drowning.
And those are conversations we're beginning to have with our kids now. Just no matter where, they can do anything that God puts that desire in their hearts. They can do anything that they desire and wish. But whatever they do, they have to do it to glorify the Lord. And those are my prayers for my kids, no matter if it's in sports, in medicine, becoming a doctor or a lawyer, or our little girl thinks she's going to be create movies, which I don't know where she gets that creativity from, not from us, but whatever she does, she can do it as long as she gives glory to the Lord. So thank you for joining me on another episode of Fearless. You survived the cameras and the microphones.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm just very proud to be your wife, and you're so good looking.
You're beautiful.
Thank you, honey.